All right, we've passed the 24-hour mark. We are on day 2 of legal cannabis in Canada. Canadian provinces and citizens still have a lot of questions about how this historic shift will be implemented. Minister Bill Blair was the federal government's point man on the file. He is now the Minister of Border Security and Organized Crime Reduction. He is our guest in studio this morning. Good to have you with us.
Good morning, Emery.
You know, I interviewed you when you very first became the Chief of Police for the city of Toronto.
I remember well.
I cannot believe and never would have foreseen a day that you and I were sitting down talking about legalized pot.
Well, what we are going to talk about is strictly regulated cannabis in this country. We've repealed a completely failed system of criminal control. It was failing our kids, it's been failing our communities, it's enriched criminals, and we've replaced it. And that's the part that I think Canadians are going to learn in the coming weeks and months. We've replaced a failed system of, all we had was the sledgehammer of a criminal charge, and we've replaced it with comprehensive regulation that controls every aspect of the production, distribution, and consumption of this drug. And it's going to create a safer and a more orderly environment for all of our communities. And frankly, it's entirely consistent with the work I did here in Toronto.
But it's still very new, and so there's still things that have to be tested. One of the big questions for people that we haven't seen yet is what happens at the border. And I guess as a regular citizen, you know, you've already said, don't lie. You do have the option to turn around. However, not really practical if I want to travel down to the United States. I want to know, what will they ask me on the U.S. side, and how do I respond?
Well, I think what you're going to see at the border is what you've always seen at the border. You know, the border authorities...
That's different for different people, though, Minister Blair.
Well, but in fairness, about 4.5 million Canadians have already admitted that they've used cannabis illegally in this country, and it hasn't been. Hundreds of thousands of people cross that border every day. It hasn't been a significant issue of impediment. You know,
it's been illegal before then. So now that it's legal and a border officer says to me, have you ever purchased pot? Do I say yes, but through legal means?
You have never done it illegally, I think is the right answer. And you know, like I said, you don't have to incriminate yourself or answer a question that you don't wish to answer. But having said that, what we've heard from the American authorities, and we're in constant contact with them, is that it's essentially business as usual. They've got a responsibility to uphold their laws and to protect the security and safety of their country, and they're going to do their job. No one has a right of entry into any country. And so their officials will ask questions and our officials will ask questions. But if you present yourself in a responsible, respectful way, frankly, do not take cannabis across that border. It's a serious federal crime. Canadians need to understand that. It may be legal on our side, but you cannot cross the border with it. But what the American authorities have assured us, and the Customs Border Patrol people put out a very useful clarification. There was a great deal of anxiety, you know, people speculating, oh my God, what are we going to do if we work in the industry, or if we've invested in the industry? They put out a clarification that said that will generally not be in grounds for refusing people entry. People need to be reassured, but at the same time, they have to understand, you don't have a right to enter the United States, so you have to abide by their rules and terms and conditions, present yourself appropriately, and I anticipate it'll be essentially business as usual.
We haven't had a chance to test that yet, so now that I have you here, I have to ask, if I do answer honestly, and I don't have all the language that maybe somebody with police training would have about how to, you know, say, I haven't done it illegally. I don't know the counter scripting to use. So if I am denied, what protections will the Canadian government offer me? What will you do for me as a citizen who has done nothing illegal but has been denied access?
They can deny you access for any reason. They don't need to justify it, but there is a process of appeal and to obtain a waiver. And we've got that process in place. One of the things that if, for example, you've obtained a pardon, that record will exist, and we'll be able to demonstrate to the U.S. that you have been pardoned for that offense if you had a previous conviction. There is already systems in place. But again, Anne-Marie, I don't anticipate that this is going to be a significant problem. Certainly if you ask the border agents. You know, it's kind of like if you ask a cop, can I park in this prohibited area? They must say no. And so if you ask them about these circumstances, they're going to tell you what the basic rules are. But generally, in my experience, they apply those rules in a very sensible, proportional way. And what they're concerned about is bringing people into their country that are going to commit crimes in their country. And that's not the case for people that have obeyed the law and acted in an appropriate way in this country.
In this country, but, you know, it is still illegal in their country. I want to move on. You know, we know that brick-and-mortar pot dispensaries right now are operating illegally, but already we've seen online sites pop up. You know, as of yesterday, new ones. They offer different things than the government sites. Really quickly, if anyone orders pot online from one of those sites, what happens?
Yeah, really clear. There's only one place in which legal pot can be obtained, and that's that which has been produced under license by Health Canada or by a licensed producer, and that which is sold through the regulated retail environment of whatever province and territory has established. In Ontario, that's currently is only an online system. So any pot that has not been produced is still unlawful to possess. It doesn't result in a criminal charge, but it can result in a ticket and a fine. Those individuals who are producing and selling marijuana outside the regulated regime are committing criminal offenses. That's up to law enforcement to deal with. And they have many priorities, but they have the tools and the regulations in place to deal with that. And in addition, with the new regulations, there are substantial financial fines that are available as well that'll take the profit out of that business. And frankly, the criminal enterprise of production and distribution of marijuana is entirely motivated by profit.
Really?
Take the money away, they'll stop.
All right, really quickly, last question and this is around testing. Is the federal government looking at another method other than the Draeger 5000 as a system of
The Draeger 5000 is the first device that's been approved. We set standards for the devices. They almost meet it before they would be approved for use by law enforcement in this country. The Draeger test has met those standards and has been approved. Other devices are going to be tested and will eventually be approved and available to law enforcement. But for the first time, Anne-Marie, in a century, this has been a crime in Canada for a century, but for the first time, the police have the legal authorities, the training that they required, and access to the technology that are going to make them far more effective in detecting and deterring impaired driving by drugs.
So you will be looking at other options other than the Draeger 5000?
Well, of course. And the additional technologies will be made available as they qualify and meet the standards that are available. I have every confidence that law enforcement, who've been urging us for many years to give them access to technologies that are in use in other jurisdictions very effectively. We've said yes. We've got the standards in place. The first device has been approved. Others will be subsequently approved. We've said yes to the police and what they need to do the job, and I have great confidence. Now that they've got it, they'll do a good job.
As a former officer, which method would you use if you were at a roadside stop?
I'd use every method. The officers have available to them their own observations of the driving, standardized field sobriety testing, drug recognition experts. The new technologies will tell them about the presence of the drug, but does not provide you with the evidence required for conviction, so you need a blood test for that. But there's a really important thing that's available with that new technology. In Ontario, for drivers with a graduated license or commercial drivers, if they fail that test and there's an indication of cannabis in the system, the police have the authority to suspend that driver, administer a fine, tow that car, render the situation immediately safe. That's a powerful new tool available to the police to deter particularly young new drivers from driving while under the influence of drugs. And once they get to know that that is a real consequence and a tool available to the police, it'll change driver behavior. It'll make our roadways safe.
All right, good to have you with us, Minister. Thanks for coming in today.
Thank you very much.